I have run into burning buildings for 20 years. I have crawled down black hallways where I could not see my own glove in front of my face, toward the one room everybody else was running out of. I thought I knew what it was to be afraid for somebody else's life. Then I came home off a 24-hour shift, dead on my feet, and found an envelope on my own kitchen counter. And that envelope scared me worse than any fire I have ever stood in front of. It was a legal notice. My wife was asking a court for permission to move my 2 children 600 miles away from me. And the reason, buried under all the lawyer's words, the reason she dressed up as a fresh start and a better life, was a man named Brandon who lived in another state. Stay with me on this one, because it doesn't end the way these usually do. I'm not going to give you a story where the cheetah gets dragged through the mud and everybody cheers. I'm going to tell you how I kept my kids in the same state as their father, without ever once making their mother the villain in front of them, and how the real victory turned out to be something quieter and harder than revenge. Where are you watching from today? Tell me, because I like knowing who's out there in the dark with me. And stay to the end, because the last thing I learned in all this is the thing I'd most want to hand to any father listening. My name is Danny. I'm 43 years old, and I'm a firefighter in South Florida, an engineer on a city engine company, which means I drive the truck and I run the pump and I go in with my crew. My father came over from Cuba with nothing but his hands, and he raised me to believe that a man's whole worth is in whether the people who depend on him can count on him. I married Steph 13 years ago. We have 2 kids, a girl named Mia who's 8, and a boy named Leo who's 5. My mother, their abuela, lives 10 minutes from us and has watched those babies almost every shift I've worked since they were born. I'm telling you that part up front, the part about family being right here, because it matters to where this goes. Let me tell you about the trust, and about my schedule. Because my schedule is the whole hinge of this thing. A firefighter doesn't work 9 to 5. I work what we call 24/48. 1 full day on, at the station, and then 2 full days off. To somebody who doesn't understand it, that sounds like a man who's gone all the time. Steph's lawyer would later try to make a jury of 1, a judge, believe exactly that I was an absent father who was never home. But anybody who's lived it knows the truth is the opposite. I am home 2 days out of every 3. I am the dad at school drop-off in the morning on my off days. I'm the one who coached Leo's little soccer team, the 4-year-olds who all run at the ball in a clump, like iron filings to a magnet. I'm the one who sat at the kitchen counter doing 2nd grade math with Mia, the one who took them to the pediatrician, who knew the name of Mia's reading teacher and Leo's favorite dinosaur, and which one of them needed the nightlight on. My job gave me something most fathers would trade their right arm for. It gave me whole days, in the daylight, with my children. I built my whole life as a father on those days, and I provided we had a good little house with a mango tree in the back my father planted. Steph worked part-time at a dental office, but my pay and my overtime carried us, and I was proud of that, the way my father taught me to be proud of carrying a family. Let me back up and tell you who we were, because you can't understand what was lost if you don't know what was built. My father came across the water from Cuba in a boat that had no business making it, with my mother and the clothes they had on. He cleaned office buildings at night and learned the trade of his hands in the day, and he never once let me see him tired. Because in his mind, letting your family see you quit was the only real failure. I became a firefighter partly because of him, because the proudest I ever saw that man was the day I graduated the academy. This old immigrant standing in the back in his one good guayabera, crying, because his boy was going to be the kind of man people called when everything was on fire. I met Steph at a cousin's wedding when I was 30. She was beautiful, and she laughed easy, and she came from a quieter, smaller family than my loud Cuban one. And I think at first she loved being swallowed up by all of us. The Sunday dinners that ran 4 hours, My mother feeding her until she begged for mercy, the cousins, the music. We married within the year. When Mia was born, my mother more or less moved in for a month. And when Leo came 2 years later, she did it again. And through all the shifts I worked, all the nights I was at the station, my mother was there. So the kids never once went without family. That's the part the Atlanta petition could never account for. And it's the part that mattered most to me. My children weren't being raised by a single mother, holding it all alone 600 miles from help. They were being raised inside a whole web of people who loved them. Every strand of it rooted right here in South Florida. The firehouse was the other half of my life, and you have to understand what that is too. The men and women on my crew are not co-workers. You crawl into the dark with somebody enough times, trusting that they've got your air and your back, and they become a kind of family. The civilian world doesn't have a word for. My captain, a big, quiet man named Whit, who'd been doing it 30 years, would become one of the only people I told the truth to during all of this. On the apparatus floor at 2 in the morning between calls. A firehouse keeps your secrets and holds you up. I'd need both before it was over. I thought a man who was home that much, who had all of that behind him, was a man whose marriage was safe. I want to tell you about a warning I got 2 years before any of this and waved off, because it's the same mistake so many of us make. About 2 years back, Steph went through a stretch where she got restless. She started saying she felt stuck. She'd grown up here, married here, never lived anywhere else, and she started talking about how she wanted a fresh start somewhere new, how the heat was crushing her, how she felt like life was happening to other people in other places. We even talked, once, quietly, about whether we should separate. And then it seemed to pass. She got busy with the kids. Things got warm between us again. And I told myself we'd weathered it, the way you weather a tropical storm that turns out to bend away from the coast at the last hour. I never asked myself whether she'd actually come back, or whether she'd just gone quiet and started looking somewhere else for the door. A fire you think you've knocked down can still be burning behind the wall, low and patient, waiting for air. I know that in a building, I forgot it in my own house. The signs came the way they always come, each one with a clean answer riding right behind it. She got onto her phone in a way she hadn't been before. Late in the other room, face turned away, and a new passcode where there'd never been one. She said it was a group chat with old high school friends who'd reconnected, that they were planning a reunion, that it was silly girl stuff I wouldn't care about. Fine, people reconnect. She took a trip to Atlanta, a girls' weekend, she called it, to see one of those old friends. She came back, lit up in a way I hadn't seen her in years, talking about how green it was up there, how the weather was actually like seasons, how nice the neighborhoods were. I thought, good, she needed to get away. I'm gone enough. She deserves a weekend. Fine. A name started coming up. Brandon. Just a friend from the reunion chat, she said. Brandon thinks this. Brandon said that funny thing. Brandon's doing really well up in Atlanta. He's in software. He's got this beautiful place. I didn't think much of it at first. A man who trusts his wife doesn't flinch at a name. But the name kept coming. And it had a warmth on it when she said it. The way you say a name you like the taste of. Fine, I told myself. She's allowed to have a friend. And the talk about Atlanta didn't stop. It grew. She started sending me listings of houses up there, half joking. Wouldn't it be amazing? Imagine the kids in a place with a real fall. Imagine getting out of this swamp. She talked about the schools up there, the opportunities, how Florida was a dead end. Every time. With a laugh, like a daydream. I kept laughing along because I could not let myself believe she was serious about uprooting our children 600 miles from their abuela, their cousins, their school, their father. I had an answer for all of it. I told myself it was a phase, the restlessness again, that it would bend away from the coast like last time. There were other things. The kind of things a man doesn't like to say out loud. The way she'd stopped reaching for me, stopped even pretending to. Months of a cold quiet on her side of the bed that I blamed on the kids and the heat and my schedule. The way she winced a little when my mother came by. This woman who'd helped raise her own children, like the family that had once swallowed her up warm, now felt like a net she wanted out of. And money. Small amounts. Moving in ways I didn't track because I'd never in 13 years had to track Steph with money. I had a reason ready for every single piece. That's what trust does. It hands you the excuse before you even have to go looking for one. It was my mother, actually, who said the thing none of my excuses could cover. She watched Steph scroll her phone through an entire Sunday dinner, smiling at it, gone somewhere else. And after Steph left the room, my mother looked at me with those eyes that came across an ocean in a boat, and she said, in Spanish, "Mijo, that woman has already left. You just haven't been told yet." I told her she was wrong. I defended my wife to my own mother. I want you to remember that, because my mother is almost never wrong about people. And I argued with her to protect a story I needed to be true. It did not bend. I want you to remember the soccer, by the way. Those 4-year-olds swarming the ball. We're going to come back to a soccer field, because that's where a piece of this ends, and it's not the piece you'd expect. The slip, the thing that made it real, wasn't a text I found or a stranger who called. It was a thick envelope a process server handed me in my own driveway, in my department t-shirt, still smelling like smoke from a structure fire I'd been on 6 hours earlier. I had been awake for more than a day. A polite young man asked if I was Daniel Reyes, and when I said yes, he handed me an envelope and told me I'd been served. And he got in his car and left me standing under my father's mango tree. It was a petition to relocate in Florida. A parent who wants to move more than 50 miles away with the children for more than 60 days can't just do it. They have to file with the court, and the other parent has the right to object, and a judge decides whether the move is in the best interest of the children. Steph's petition said she had an opportunity for a better life in the Atlanta area, more family support, better schools, a fresh start for her and the kids. It was written cool and reasonable, and nowhere in it, of course, was the name Brandon. But I'd read enough of those listings, heard enough warmth on that name, to know that the better life 600 miles away had a man's face on it. And that man's face was not going to be raising my children if I had a single breath left in my body. I want to tell you I drove straight to wherever she was and let her have it. I didn't. Something in me went very still. The stillness that comes over me at a working fire, where the noise drops away and the training takes the wheel. You do not run into a building you haven't sized up. You read it first. You find your way in, and you protect your way out before you ever commit. So I folded that petition into my back pocket, and I went inside. And I made my kids dinner like it was any other off day. And the next morning, I called a lawyer. Her name was Karen, and she did family law down here for a long time. And she walked me through the Florida relocation statute like a fire instructor walking a probie through a floor plan. The law, she said, lays out exactly what a judge has to weigh. The child's relationship with each parent, the age and needs of the children, and how a move would affect them. Whether the parent who wants to move is doing it in good faith, and the real reason behind it. Whether the parent left behind has been actually involved, day to day, in raising those kids. And whether the move would, on balance, be in the children's best interest, not the parents'. The burden, she told me, starts on the parent who wants to relocate. It was on Steph to prove the move was good for Mia and Leo. It was not on me to prove it was bad. Then she said the thing that turned my fear into a plan. She said, "Danny, they're going to argue you're never home because you're a firefighter. So we are going to show this court exactly what your schedule actually is. We are going to show that you are home 2 days out of every 3. We are going to bring the soccer rosters with your name as the coach, the school sign-in sheets in your handwriting, the pediatrician records where you're the one who brought them, the teachers who'll say you're at every conference. We are going to take the very thing she wants to use against you, your job, and show the judge it's the reason you're more present than most fathers who work a normal week. And we are going to gently, carefully, with evidence and not with name-calling, show the court that the real engine of this move isn't a job offer or a school district. It's a man.
She gave me the rules, and they were rules I already knew in my bones from another kind of emergency. Do not confront Steph and blow it up. You'll only give her a story about how volatile you are. Do not move out. Do not take the kids and run. Do not do anything a lawyer can paint as you being the unstable one. Document everything. And here was the one that mattered most to me, the one that kept me sane. Do not, ever, run her down in front of those children. Not once. Because the same statute that weighs the move also weighs which parent is more likely to keep the kids connected to the other parent. If I stayed the steady one, the one who never poisoned them against their mother, that wasn't just the decent thing, it was the strong move. In my world, we call it protecting the means of egress. You never, ever let anything block the children's way back to the people who love them. Not even your own anger. The case we built was made of the most ordinary things in the world, and that's exactly why it was strong. Karen had me pull 3 years of my own life into a binder. Every soccer season where my name sat in the box marked coach. The school's sign-in log, page after page, in my own block handwriting. On Tuesdays and Wednesdays and Thursdays, the off days a normal 9-to-5 father never has. The pediatrician's file, where on visit after visit, the parent listed as bringing the child in was me. Report cards I'd signed. A list, which gutted me to write and gutted me worse to read back, of the bedtime routines and the favorite books and the exact way Leo needed his sandwich cut. The kind of knowledge you only have if you are actually there. None of it was dramatic. All of it together was a portrait no glossy 4-bedroom house in Georgia could argue with. It was the case for the prosecution made entirely out of love. Logged in ballpoint over 3 years without my ever knowing I was building it. There was a night in the middle of all of it. The worst night. Where I broke down on the apparatus floor at the station. We'd just come back from a call. A bad one. A house fire where we got everybody out, but it was close. And I was still in my gear, and the adrenaline was draining out the way it does. And all of a sudden, the thing I'd been holding all week just came up out of me. My captain, Whit, found me sitting on the back step of the engine with my head in my hands. He didn't say much. He's not a man of many words. He sat down next to me in the quiet of that bay, 2 in the morning, the only sound the truck ticking as it cooled. And he let me say it out loud for the first time. That I was scared I was going to lose my kids. And he said the thing I needed. He said, "You run toward fire for a living, Danny. You already know you don't get to fall apart in the middle of it. You fall apart after, with your people, and then you go back in." The firehouse held me up that night so I could keep standing up at home. Every man needs a place like that. And I'd built mine without ever knowing how much I'd needed. So that's what I did. For about 3 months, while the lawyers did their work and a hearing date sat out on the calendar like a fire on the horizon. I lived 2 lives. In one, I was building a case, quietly, with Karen, gathering every record of every ordinary day I'd spent being those kids' father. In the other, I was just dad. I made the lunches. I went to the soccer. I did the math homework. I did not say one word against their mother. Even on the nights it cost me everything I had to swallow it. Because Mia and Leo did not ask to be in the middle of any of this, and I was not going to set them on fire to get warm. I have to tell you about the 2 things that nearly broke me before the hearing. Because,
If you've ever been a parent scared of losing your kids, you'll feel them in your chest. The first was a day, about a month before the hearing, when Steph's lawyer made the move sound so good in a mediation session that for an afternoon, I believed I was going to lose. They laid it all out. The school district up there with the high ratings, a 4-bedroom house with a yard, photos and all. Steph's testimony that she'd be a stay-at-home mom up there, more present than ever, because Brandon, who of course was described only as a friend offering support, had the means to make that possible. Against all that shine, my lawyer put up a firefighter who worked 24-hour shifts, and for one long afternoon, looking at those glossy photos of a life I could never give them on a city salary, I thought, what if the judge looks at this and decides the kids really are better off up there, with the money and the yard and the seasons? What if doing everything right isn't enough? That was the longest night of the whole thing. The night I lay awake doing the math of a life with my children 600 miles away. Weekends and summers and a phone screen. And I understood for the first time in my life why a strong man might cry into a pillow so his kids don't hear. The second was worse, and it came fast. About 2 weeks before the hearing, Steph announced she was taking the kids up to Atlanta for a week, just a visit, to see her friend, over their school break. And every alarm I have went off at once, because I knew, the way you know a building's about to come down, that if those kids went up there for a visit before the judge ruled, there was a real chance they wouldn't come back. That I'd be fighting from 600 miles behind instead of even... I did not rage. I called Karen at 7 in the morning, and she moved like the professional she was. We went to the court and got a temporary order keeping the children in the state until the relocation was decided. It wasn't dramatic. It was a piece of paper that did exactly what protecting the means of egress is supposed to do. It kept the way home open. The kids stayed. The visit didn't happen. And I learned, again, that in the worst moments you do not need to be the loudest man in the room. You need to be the one who already knew where the exits were. The hearing itself was not a movie. There was no gasp in the courtroom, no single moment where it all turned. It was hours of quiet, careful truth. Karen put up my whole life as a father, record by record. The soccer rosters, the school sign-ins, the pediatrician's notes. Teacher after teacher describing a dad who was there. She put up my actual schedule and let the judge do the math on how many waking daytime hours I spend with my kids versus a father with a normal job. They put Steph on first, and her lawyer was good. He painted Atlanta like a brochure, the schools, the yard, the 4 bedrooms, the fresh start. He framed me as a man married to a dangerous job, gone in 24-hour stretches, a father the children loved but only saw in pieces. And sitting there listening to a stranger describe me as a part-time parent in my own children's lives, I felt the old heat come up. The urge to stand and shout that I had coached every season, that I knew the cut of Leo's sandwich, that I had been there. Karen put her hand flat on the table, a small signal we'd agreed on, which meant, be still, let the records talk. So I stayed still. I let 3 years of ballpoint ink do the shouting for me. Then my mother testified. This was the part I hadn't braced for. They put my 70-year-old mother on the stand, and through the interpreter she told the court, simple and steady, about the web those children lived inside, the Sunday dinners, the cousins, the nights she had them while I worked. She told the judge that in Atlanta there would be a house, but here there was a family, and that a child needs the second one more than the first. She didn't cry until she stepped down, and then she crossed the courtroom and squeezed my hand. This woman who'd crossed an ocean in a boat. And I understood that she'd been right months earlier and had still shown up to fight for me anyway. Which is the whole of what family is. And then, gently, without ever calling Steph a name, she established the real reason for Atlanta. The reunion chat, the trips, the man named Brandon, whose existence Steph had to finally acknowledge under oath, and whose role she could no longer pretend was just friendship. Not to humiliate her, just to show the court that the petition's good faith reasons, the job and the schools, were a costume on top of something else, and that the something else served the mother's heart, not the children's best interest. The judge denied the relocation. He said, in his own words, that he had no doubt Steph loved her children, but that the move was not shown to be in their best interest, that these were kids deeply rooted in their school, their extended family, and their relationship with an unusually present father, and that the reasons offered for uprooting them did not outweigh all of that. Mia and Leo were staying in Florida. We would share custody, here, where their whole world was. I drove the kids home from school myself that afternoon, the same as any off day, and they didn't know a courtroom had just decided the shape of their childhood. In the back seat, Mia asked me, out of nowhere the way kids do, whether it was true we might move to a place with snow because she'd heard Mama talk about it. I caught her eyes in the mirror, and I told her the truth in the only words that mattered. I told her this was home, that her abuela was here, and her school was here, and her daddy was here, and that here was where we were going to stay. She thought about that for a second, and then she asked if we could get ice cream, and we did, and that was the whole conversation. And it was the most important one I've ever had. They never knew how close it came. That's a kind of victory nobody hands you a certificate for. The fights your children never find out you fought for them. And now I'll tell you the part I promised. The part that's not about anybody getting destroyed. I didn't feel like cheering. I want to be honest with you about that. Because I think we're sold a story that the moment you win is the moment the other person burns and you feel clean. That's not what happened. And I'm glad it's not. Steph didn't get publicly ruined. Brandon didn't get dragged through anything. The affair, once the move was off the table, just sort of went out. The way a fire goes out when you take away its oxygen. He was 600 miles away, and a fantasy is mostly made of distance. Within a few months it was over between them, and she never moved. What I had to decide then was who I was going to be. I had won. I had every right. By the rules of the story we all get told. To make her life small. To be cold. To use the kids as a wedge. To let her feel every day what she'd tried to do. And I want you to hear me. I chose not to. Not because she deserved mercy. I genuinely don't know if she did. I chose it because of Mia and Leo. Because the same children I'd fought 600 miles to keep near me deserved a mother and a father who could stand in the same kitchen and figure out a soccer schedule like two adults. Hating her well would have cost them. So I put the hate down, the way you finally set down an air pack after a long fire, because carrying it was only going to hurt the people I was trying to protect. It was not easy, and it was not fast. But Steph and I built something, slowly, that I'm prouder of than the win in that courtroom. We co-parent. Really co-parent. She has the kids on my shift days, and I have them the rest. We sit on the same side of the field at Leo's games now. We were both at Mia's school play, 2 rows apart. And we clapped for the same kid. There are still hard days, but my children did not have to grow up watching their parents try to set each other on fire. They get a mother, and they get a father. And they get to keep their abuela and the mango tree and the only home they've ever known. That, it turns out, is what I was actually fighting for. Not to win, to keep their world whole. I told you we'd come back to a soccer field. And here it is. And it's the smallest thing. And it's everything. About a year after the courtroom, Leo had a Saturday game. I was coaching, the way I always have, a clump of 5-year-olds chasing a ball in the Florida heat. And I looked over at the sideline and there was Steph, in a folding chair, next to my mother, the two of them sharing a thermos of cafecito, cheering for the same little boy. My mother, who had told me in Spanish that my wife had already left, and the wife who had tried to take that boy 600 miles away. Sitting side by side in the shade because a 5-year-old in cleats was more important than anything that had passed between any of us. Nobody watching that sideline would have known there'd ever been a war. That was the moment I understood what I'd actually won. Not a verdict, a Saturday. 1,000 ordinary Saturdays where my kids get everybody who loves them in the same place at the same time. You don't get a trophy for that. You just get to keep your life.
I won't pretend I came out of it without scars.
There were nights I grieved the marriage I thought I had, and the woman I thought I'd married, who it turned out had been quietly looking for an exit for 2 years, while I told myself we'd weathered the storm. And I had to own my piece of it, because a man always has a piece. I'd been so proud of providing, so proud of the soccer and the math and the bills, that I never once sat still long enough to ask my wife if she was actually still in the marriage with me, or just standing in it. I confused being present with paying attention. They are not the same thing. You can be in the house every off day, you can be at every game and every conference, and still never once put your hand on the door of your own marriage to feel whether it had gone cold behind it. I was the most present, absent man you ever met. I learned that the hard way, and I learned it too late to save the marriage, though just in time to save the family, which I've come to believe is the more important of the two. So here's what a tired firefighter would tell you tonight. Everybody knows the rule about a fire. You feel a door before you open it. Because the worst fires are the ones you can't see, the ones burning behind the wall, quiet, waiting for you to give them air. A marriage is the same. The danger is almost never the thing that's roaring in the open. It's the thing that's gone quiet. So put your hand on the door at home now and then, even when everything seems fine, especially when everything seems fine. And if the day ever comes when somebody tries to take the people you love 600 miles away from you, remember that you don't beat a fire by screaming at it. You beat it by being the calmest, most prepared person in the building, and by protecting, above everything else, the way home. I still drive the engine. I still go toward the thing everybody else runs from. My kids are 10 minutes away at their abuela's most shift nights, and they'll be at the station for dinner one of these evenings, climbing on the truck like they own it. Which, the way I see it, they do. Tell me where you're listening from. And tell me this. If you'd won the way I won, could you have set the anger down for your kids' sake? It's the hardest thing I ever did, harder than any fire. I think more of you could do it than believe you can. Go put your hand on the door at home tonight. Make sure it's still cool.